The revolution will not be televised, but the stories will be told. Today's guest tells those stories. Welcome to the Cleveland Pulse. I am Edwin Hubbard Jr., your host, and today we have a very special guest, Leah D. Hudnall, the owner of the Legacy Perspective. Welcome, Leah.
Hello, Mr. Edwin.
We're excited to have you. I'm excited to talk about the work you do. But first, let's talk about the Legacy Perspective.
Yes, well, the Legacy Perspective is a manifestation of how I grew up. I didn't know quite what work I wanted to do, but I know that I wanted it to involve community. I was born into a village of people who loved one another and were loyal to one another. My grandparents were both migrants from the South, and once they found one another in Cleveland and started a family, they chose to have a house built on Tarkington Avenue. They had one of the first houses built on that street, and then other neighbors started to have their homes built, and they raised their children together. And so by the time I was born, I was on a street where people had known each other for, at that point, 30 years. I could walk up and down. I could lose my key, and it was okay, even if I was locked out, because I had 4 other houses to choose from, at least. And so I wanted other people in my world to feel that type of love. And so the Legacy Perspective is all about telling stories for organizations and individuals so that they can have their own legacy and tell their stories and their narratives in their own right.
It's an amazing company.
Thank you.
You know, and as it pertains to social justice, we know how incredibly it is to capture those stories. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of TV watching as it pertains to historical documents in the history of Black people specifically. And as you may know, like the oldest person who was a part of the Tulsa bombing recently passed away. But there has been so much footage gained from the last survivors as it led up to that last person in order for us to really understand the story of what happened in Tulsa. And had those people not been able to capture those stories, a huge part of U.S. history would be lost.
Yes. I think one of the things that disturbs me the most about history, especially Black history, is that rarely do we own our own history. We have to check into libraries and museums and different archival institutions to take a look at our own history. They won't even let you take it home. It can have your grandmother's name in it, but it's not yours. And the same can go for art as well. And so I think now that we have just a bit more power and we've made some progress in this right, it's time for us to not only tell our own stories, but own them.
How can one do that?
Well, first, I think people need to understand that there's value across the board. I think many of us, especially as young Black kids, we're all given the speech about having to work twice and triple as hard as our peers to get just as much. And while that builds grit, it also builds in this kind of internal inferiority complex that if I'm not Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, then maybe my story isn't valuable. Or if I don't change the world in the way that Minister Malcolm did, then maybe it's not valuable. And it's just not true. If you change conditions for those on your job in Pleasantville, USA, you have to tell your story because there's someone else down the road that's trying to figure out how to do it, whatever that thing is. And they might need a blueprint. And so 1, I think we have to find value in our own stories. 2, I think we have to be okay with not chasing perfection. So many of us, myself included, are trying to be delivered from the people-pleasing perfection ministry. And so we often don't like to produce things until it's ready. There is no ready. If there's something on your heart or there's something that you think can be valuable to others, I don't care if you put your iPhone up and record yourself. If you write it down in your iPhone notes, you may not be the best writer. You may not really know technology, but document the story and at least save it somewhere and tell someone about it. And then that person maybe can help you polish it and share it.
I think I find myself writing down stories just for my own mental sanity, and being transparent. And you know about me, I lost my mother earlier this year. And I'm often talking to my children about, things grandma did when I was a kid. And I was fortunate to have parents who grew up in the civil rights era, who are baby boomers. And I'm often like jogging my memory back. Like, what did my mom tell me about the things that she experienced as a child? Because she was the last of her family. Her immediate family. She was the last remaining member. And if I don't have it, nobody else has it. And that's incredibly important, just when, remembering the legacy of my mother and her family. But then they really think about as it pertains to social justice, if people are not telling those stories, our history is forgotten.
Absolutely. And it's a great responsibility that I think we're not, if I can give our generation a little bit of feedback, we need to lean into it. It's time for us to kind of grow up in that regard. And I share, unfortunately, space with you in the club nobody wants to be in, of those who have lost their mothers. And quite frankly, it's what inspired me to start the Legacy Perspective. My grandparents had 4 children. My grandfather has buried all 4 of his children plus his wife. And I thought about not including my grandmother, but the children, my mother as the eldest and her 3 siblings. Their stories were funny, loving, endearing, wild, salacious, and all of them were too short. Every last one of their stories was cut too short. None of them lived past 52. And one, it gave me this anxiety around, outside of my grandfather, no one has lived past 61. That's how old my grandmother was. And so I've always felt like I don't have a lot of time. So in many situations, I'm very serious because I don't feel like I have time to, just lily-dally around. But 2, grief also inspires you to claim your life in the way that you want it. Because there's really no colder splash of water across one's face, especially with the loss of a parent, and then most especially with the loss of a mother. And so like you, I became obsessed with capturing these stories from my grandfather while he's still here to tell them. And that's really how I got into documenting stories. It was during the pandemic. And I just started setting an iPhone up in front of him and asking him to talk about his journey from Georgia to Cleveland. And it was like curse words and like train companies that I had never heard of. And I mean, he was just talking and telling me stuff. He chewed tobacco, so he was spitting tobacco out. It was just, and so we redid it in a way that I could get past Apple. But that was the first time, to your point, after experiencing so much loss and then being confined in that way, I was like, I owe it to myself, but I also think I owe it to them. I owe it to my mother and her siblings and to my grandmother to document their stories through him and through what I know, to your point, from them directly. I owe it to them.
Yeah, my family's getting down to the last singers. It's scary. It is downright scary to think about, maybe in a few years, there will be no singers left. And that next generation is my generation. Like, and dare
we
I
are
say,
the adults.
Right. We are the adults in the room, and we have to be held responsible for passing the story to the next generation.
Yeah.
And making sure our children understand the importance of to tell our stories and stories that they create throughout their lives and move forward. Because if we don't do it, nobody else will.
Yep.
When it comes to social justice, it's important because if you don't know where you came from, you're liable to repeat the things that you've historically experienced.
We are repeating the things we historically have experienced.
Absolutely.
We're in that chapter of the book right now, it seems. And for me, it took me a while to figure out what my role was in the social justice movement. I think one of the quotes that was floating around at different conferences and on social media was, whatever you're doing right now is what you would have been doing during the civil rights movement. And that really convicted me because I was like, well, what am I doing? And And I think we all have a role to play. There's people that can galvanize crowds and marches. There's people that, are on the hospitality committee. They're going to make sure everybody is fed. We have our lawyers who can make sure that our rights are protected, and we can go on and on. And I didn't quite fit into any of those boxes. So for many years, I felt like I didn't have a place. And then I realized and reminded myself that you love writing and you're a trained writer. I was a journalism minor, communications major at Howard. And so you absolutely have a place in the movement, but I didn't know what that looked like because I'm also very creative. But I also knew that when I was in different professional spaces and civic spaces, and I was hearing certain social conditions being talked about or just different things that we all work on as a community here in Cleveland, I would get highly agitated. I've always in many professional spaces been called the angry Black woman, but rarely am I ever angry. But that is one thing that makes me angry is when stories and facts in the narratives are twisted in a way that doesn't serve Black Clevelanders well, or doesn't leave Black Clevelanders with dignity. I'm very big on that. And so I realized that if I felt that passionate about it, that I should do something. And so that's what I've been trying to do in my own way. I don't know if, the report card has yet to come back on how successful or impactful these things are, but it allows me to sleep at night because there were many nights where I was sleepless because I was trying to figure out what my place was.
I think you're solidifying it. I think the work.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go on record saying I think the work that you do is amazing.
Thank you.
First and foremost, and I know we're gonna dig into that a little bit, but I always think back to I've had so many conversations on why things are the way they are, not just us as a nation, but even us as Clevelanders, and everything goes back to systemic.
Yeah.
A lot of the problems that we're facing now are because there were problems that existed before that were never fixed, or we never realized, or we never went to have a conversation about, why people live on this side of town, why things happen these ways that they happen, and why kids or people in these specific areas have a leg up where people in other places don't, or even the argument on private versus public school and things of those nature.
Well, I'm Cleveland through and through. My street signs were blue. I went to the same Cleveland Municipal Elementary School that my mother and my aunts did. And the same junior high school, that would be Emil B. DeZose and Whitney Young, Blue Ribbon 1998. And then I graduated high school from Cleveland School of the Arts as a writing major. Any program that was available in the 90s for youth development, you name it, I did it. I was a Cleveland Scholarship Program, now known as College Now, scholarship recipient. I worked the pool at Zelma George in the summers for $4.85 through the YOU program. I did programs at the Playhouse. Anything that was available, I did it. And it's really that lived experience as a young person in the city of Cleveland is what propelled me to want to come back home. Because there was a moment there when I was pursuing my bachelor's degree where I thought I would stay in D.C., and my mother fell ill, and I knew I had to come home as an only child. But I was like, what am I coming home to do? Cleveland is a city that's rich in Black history, but does not have Black culture. And it doesn't have Black culture celebrated in a way that if we take a road trip to Detroit for the weekend, we know we can have a time. We can have a good Black time in Detroit. It's guaranteed. We don't have to wait for this influencer to throw a party. We don't have to wait for this one night a year to have a gala. We can go any weekend, market, and we're going to have we know if we go to Chicago, we're going to have a good Black time. We know if we fly to Atlanta, we're going to have a good Black time. I knew that I had been in D.C. and I was having a good Black time. President Obama was the president. I was at Howard. I was just having a ball. And I had to come home. And I knew that was going to be an adjustment for me. Even that short amount of time being gone and that young, I knew that was going to be hard. And it has proven to be true even all these years later. And I think that's the part, to your point, some things we didn't correct, but I also think that there are things now that are influencing the way that our children are developing in this city. And we want to, rightfully so, pin it back to so many different social conditions. But the one thing I like to start with is, what does a 15-year-old in the city of Cleveland have to look forward to? Most of them don't. Their schools, most of them don't have bands. If you don't know how to throw a ball or bounce a ball, you know, what is it to do? When I was in CMSD, we had competitions, we had writing programs. I mean, we had all these things that even if you weren't academically focused, you could get through the school day because you know you had this thing waiting for you if you behaved. They don't have that. And so now we're all wondering, why are they all like this? Well, what would you do if Friday never came? Us as adults working 9 to 5, we live for Friday. What if Friday never came? What if it was always Monday through Thursday in your world? How would you be? How would you act? Yes, they need food, and yes, they need coats, and yes, they need this, but they're miserable. Where can they go to have a good Black time? And I think that's part of, like, we owe it to Cleveland to give her back this part of her culture. Because I see so many parades. I see so many celebrations of other cultures in Cleveland. I want mine back.
At what point do you feel like the band and all of the opportunities and things that you were engaged in went away?
About when we left. Okay. I mean, I was the first generation of Cleveland public school students who had to begin catching the RTA to get to school. And I'll never forget that because in my household, that was a huge deal. I was the only child. I'm the only grandchild. So while I have one biological mother, I had 3 mothers, a uncle, I had a grandmother, a grandfather, and they all felt like I was their number one priority. And I wanted to be like my friends and catch the bus. I wanted to feel grown. I wanted to take my CD-ROM and get on the bus. And my grandmother was like, absolutely not. You're going to go and get in that Nissan Altima and we're going to drive. And I remember my uncle having a conversation with her about, you may not always be here. I was in junior high school at the time, and Mayor White had announced that, this was the transition because the schools were low on funds. And my uncle had a conversation with my grandmother in our kitchen about the fact that she may not always be there to drive me everywhere I need to go. And so how about they start slowly teaching me how to operate and navigate since yellow buses were not coming back. The funniest story is when she finally let me catch the bus, I realized that she was trailing the bus in her car the whole time. I didn't know it till I got off the bus. But so while I thought I was doing my thing, she was right there every transfer. She was following me. But the reason I always say that is important is because my grandmother died 2 weeks before I started high school. And that same reality that my uncle sat there and talked to her about happened. But my uncle he lived this very colorful life and very educated, but also very street and everything in between. And I remember he sat me down and gave me like all of these like neighborhood rules to, as he said, not looking like a lick. And, it was like where to sit on the bus so that you could see the front and the side door. You can have your headphones on, but you can't play them too loud. You need to be able to hear your surroundings. When you're walking, you have to turn around so many feet to make sure, like he was giving me all these things. And I remember thinking he was absolutely crazy. I was like, what is this man talking about? But then, our generation was Aliana DeFries and, the 3 young ladies who were captured. And, so when I started to see those things on the news of girls that were my age that should have been in school like me and their mothers can't find them, right? For a decade, they've just been captured. All of that sounded less and less crazy. And then to touch on your point about classism, when I got to Howard, I realized that I was more prepared for city life than many of my contemporaries who came from Northeast Ohio. So I went to Howard with people that I love, but they grew up in Cleveland Heights and Bedford and this and that, which is fine, right? Because I'm from the Southeast side, so Maple Heights, all of those is blurred lines for me. I really don't care. But they didn't know how to catch a bus. Some of them didn't know how to wash their clothes. Some of them didn't know how to grocery shop with a budget, right? Like there were certain things that their parents had just afforded them a life that I want my kids to have that type of life. But also they weren't quite set up all the way for independence so much. And we helped each other because turns out I needed help with math, So it was helpful, but you start to see in some respects where our children need help in ways they need help in very real hard ways. They're hard tangibles, but there's also a cultural piece that I think we owe them and we owe ourselves.
So how do we make that change?
I think that we don't have a we. I think that's my first observation. Who is the we? When we say Black Cleveland, who is that anymore? I don't know. Tell me the church and I will show up, but I think we're so fragmented now. I think that there are things that are extremely Black Cleveland, right? If I said some things to you, you would be like, oh yeah, like if I said the Cotton Club, you'd be like, if I said Gerald Levert, you'd be like, yeah, I got, like all those things are just Black Cleveland coded. But where do we congregate? How do we build our collective power? If we as Black Cleveland, quote unquote, wanted to get together and decide who we were voting for mayor or judge or whatever, who signals that for us? Who are people listening to? And I think now it's so split up that it's hard for us to organize. I think we all could agree that we owe our babies peace, safety, warmth, shelter, but also joy. But I think it's hard for us to get in the room and to devise an agenda and a plan to strategize. But if we were able to do that, let's just say, let's say we're going to go on down to Antioch. I don't know. But let's say that's where we end up. I do think that there needs to be an investment in a cultural celebration. And I struggle with this because as someone, I do a lot of project management. So a lot of my time in community is spent wearing all Black and directing the vendors on where to go, telling the caterers where to go, telling the videographer what to shoot. I usually don't look that glamorous. And many people confuse me with the help and whatever, but I'm helping because I care about whatever I'm working on. I'm rarely interviewed. I'm usually interviewing people or I'm the ghostwriter for the questions for people to be interviewed. And one of the things that I struggle with is that with so many realities and needs in Cleveland, it's hard to ask a funder to support an event, right? Like the federal government is, which I don't know which camera, the federal government is closing its doors and shutting its windows on the poor. So who am I to come and say, hey, we want to have a parade? That's almost tone deaf, right? But also, on the other hand, people need social connection to survive, right? And so I've been trying to map out in my mind, and even for the work I do with storytelling, what's the value on this, right? Because it's a very easy place to get to say, we don't have time for that right now. But I also think we're seeing the effects of us saying for at least one generation, we don't have time for that right now. We've seen when other cities celebrate Black culture, it has an economic win at the end. There's literally treasure at the end of the rainbow when you allow people to thrive, right? And I don't think Black people, many of them that I know, I've not taken a census, I don't think many Black people in Cleveland feel like they can thrive. And so I think we need to have that conversation. And I don't know what that looks like, but to me, it's a convening of some sort. And an all class, all culture, if that makes sense. So it can't be Black Civic Cleveland over here, Black, I hate the term working class, but for this conversation, working class over here, and then we got the Black educators down here. It can't be that. It needs to be one.
So you really said something that struck me when I think about culturally, because I always kind of thought differently about it. Chicago has a strong Black culture. Mm-hmm. D.C. has a strong Black culture. Cleveland, if you look at by the numbers, is a Black town. Mm-hmm. But culturally,
when you get to our airport, you see guitars.
right.
Sorry, I cracked myself up.
I can't help but to think, why?
Well, what have we demanded? What have we demanded? That's what I'm saying. When we get to the church, what do we want? I do appreciate that there have been like exhibit installations at the airport. So, now people who are visiting can learn about Stephanie Tubbs Jones. And, there's different things that have centered on Black culture artistically and creatively that have shown up at the airport. And I'm assuming that this new airport that we are hoping to receive will have more of that probably will be permanent. But yeah, I mean, let me run down my facts so that people understand I have my receipts. I'm a tax-paying resident of the city of Cleveland. I'm a third-generation city of Clevelander. So I reserve the right to critique my city. Shout out to James Baldwin. But I think we have to demand the experience that we want, and we have to invest in it. And this is a dangerous conversation. Okay, I'm going to jump out just a little bit because I was about to go to the other bullet point that might get the podcast canceled. Okay, so when colleagues from out of town come to Cleveland and they ask us, what Black-owned restaurant can I go to? We only have one hand worth of suggestions to give them that are going to be open no matter what, that they can actually sit down, take off their jacket, and enjoy the meal there. And it's no shade to the carryouts because I love a good rib and a good wing, fry hard with sauce. But okay, but that's a sign of something that's unhealthy. There's something going on with the city, with the first Black mayor ever, and we have 5 restaurants that when we're giving them to you, we hope that they have the capacity to even serve you because they're not accustomed to even having that much traffic on certain days, right? Like, they know a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but Wednesday night, girl, I don't know. You might have to go on down to the Outback, because this is Cleveland. And I feel embarrassed when I have to tell people that. I feel embarrassed because I talk a lot of cash money about Cleveland. I'm not from Ohio. I'm from Cleveland. And I'm from the city of Cleveland. I'm not from the other places. And I can't even give you a restaurant. I can't, and so I think, I can, but my options are limited. So that bothers me. I want to be able to send somebody to a Black jazz club or a Black speakeasy where you don't have to oonce your way through your drinks, right? Like, shout out to the oontzers, but is Aaliyah in the playlist? Is anyone, I want that, and I deserve that. You know how much money and sweat and blood that my family has put into this city? I deserve to go into a place that boosts the economy where I can also feel like myself. I could see art that I would put in my home. I can hear music that I would put on my own speaker. I always feel like an outsider when I'm going out here because I have to pick and choose. If I want a good drink and a good environment that's calm and, stable, I got to sacrifice the music. You know what I'm saying? If I want a specialty dish that I know is going to hit every time and the people are, they're there to serve, and I know I got to sacrifice the crowd. They're not going to look like me, right? And when me and all of my friends get together and we all get to laughing at high decibels, we all getting the looks, right? Like, but if we were with each other, that wouldn't be a thing. But where can we go? That's not the third Friday in this institution, and then this one is the second Saturday. You got to have all these calendars to be Black in Cleveland. I don't have time for that. Like, what if I just want to go? So
part of that has to be a challenge for us too, though. Mm-hmm. Business owners, if you out there and you create what you desire.
But we, to their defense, we have to support.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
If you give me quality, check my Carfax, I will give you the money, okay? I will give you the money. Give me quality, I'll give you the money. And quality means a paved parking lot. I'm so sorry, but let's start with the foundation. A paved parking lot, a calm, crowd. And there's different things for everybody.
Good
but
service.
Yeah.
Good customer service.
Yeah, customer service. I'm the customer. And I'm not a customer that thinks that I can do no wrong or, I'm just a well-balanced customer. I'm ready to have an experience. I have 2 kids under 10. Please, just go back there and bring me back the libation, okay? But I struggle with that. And I feel jealous that, I was raised, let me put it this way. When the All-Star game was here in 97 and I wore a Michael Jordan jersey, my grandfather almost had a heart attack. When when AI was Allen Iverson and not Chat, and I put on that Philadelphia jersey, I thought I was going to be sat on the porch. My grandfather doesn't play that. Either you wearing your city or you sitting down or wear a blank shirt. So the fact that I really won a Detroit versus everybody shirt, it bothers me because I wasn't even raised like that. But I'd be like, I want to be down. What is that? And we have people, creatives that have had different things like merch and things like that I've liked and bought. But I feel like where it takes over the city, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. Shout out to Detroit.
Shout out. And look, if you go to Akron,
definitely.
Yeah, so it's like
they have a culture for sure.
It's ours is waiting for us to reclaim it, and we have such a rich one to claim. Like I
think there's some Cleveland staples, but I think that there's a lot to be desired.
Yes,
I think we just need to just boost on to this thing.
Yeah.
And so that culture piece is big.
Yes,
that culture piece is big. All right, so let's pivot a little bit and. I want to know about some of the projects and things that you've been working on.
Yeah, well, yes. So in my career, I have worked for 3 local foundations, and I did that for about an 8-year stint. And so really all I know is grant proposals and grant awards. It is a very unique perspective to nonprofit work. I've never written a grant. I've only reviewed them and recommended to the board for funding. And so what that does is where most people start out and build their career up, usually in a field. They have a niche. They have, criminal justice or public health or whatever that is. What that did for me was very early on, I was exposed to how the system all worked together because we were recommending grants and clusters. These were all of your health partners, and this is how they work together or they don't. These are all your education partners, and this is, and a lot of people still don't have that view. And I always start with that because I think that's one of my superpowers. And I'm thankful to God that it worked out so that I could have that unique experience. And so I say that to say it's what shapes how I like to do community work, which is comprehensively and strategically because I've seen so much fragmented work. Cuyahoga County has a lot of money. We are really resource rich and, collaboratively poor. I always make the joke that if somebody took the time to just put on a calendar, even for 1 year, all of the community events and how they overlap, like we would probably all be shocked. You could go do 2 kids literacy things. You could do 2 food bank. It's always things that are happening and the need is large. So I get that. But I think it's an area of opportunity for us. And so I've started to do work around project management, so helping organizations and leaders pull off their dreams and their visions for high quality convenings. And so that could look like my girl, Crystal Bryant Ajaman and Afro Pack. That could look like Family Fun Day at Tower City with Dante's Gift Express. That could look like helping Third Space Action Lab with the soiree every other year. And all of those things are Black-centered and promote unity and joy and all those great things. In addition to that, I'm a writer. So I write a lot of reports for people. I ghostwrite a lot. But in the middle of all that, I was trying to figure out how to really use these creative, I would say, strengths. Some people say gifts. That I have, because I'm not a photographer, I'm not a videographer, I cannot paint, I cannot draw, right? But I have visions all the time of how things should be placed. Like if I had all those people together and I asked them to do a thing, this is how it should look. So one of those things recently where I've been able to pull all those things together is Relay Cleveland. And Relay Cleveland was a culmination of many different experiences. One being a urban affairs lecturer / professor, at Cleveland State University. I taught a class called the African American Experience. And at the time, it was a university-wide required elective. So I was receiving students who were focused on nursing and journalism and film and business, but they had to come through this class. And I started to realize that I had to change the way I approached the class in order for me to survive the class and not lose my mind, and in order for them to get something out of it and not just be, 12 weeks of paperwork. And one of those things is that I had to be able to build trust and safety within that classroom. And many of the students who are in our local institutions have never had a Black woman educator. And many of their families, and this is them admitting this to me, this is not me making this up, have told them out of love, don't go to the east side of Cleveland. And so how does that set me up for success to have power at the front of that room when I hold two identities that they've already kind of X'd out? Stay away from. Them Black women in that east side, and I'm very east side, I'm very southeast side to be specific. And so I had to have that conversation with them, and it broke my heart. But what I started to do was I would put a picture of me and my husband and my children on the screen. And I would say, learning what you knew about me, do you think I would have my children anywhere that wouldn't be safe for them? And, after week 4 and 5 and 6, they'd be like, oh, no, Professor, no, we know you, And I think it helped. And so one of the things that I did in that class was I created a 3-week breakout on Black experiences in public education in Cleveland. And I heard from young people who said things like, oh, we thought they just liked their neighborhoods like that. We thought they just liked their schools like that, because they really didn't know. 30 minutes from the city of Cleveland to Avon are two totally different worlds. And so they don't know. And so that stuck with me. When I was in these philanthropic institutions, education was always my jam because I was that kid, right? And I was studying some of the investments that were being made historically in education and present day. And I kept that in the back of my mind. And then Mayor Justin Bibb appointed me to the Cleveland School Board, which was a huge deal. I can say that I governed my grandmother's school district, which everybody can't say, so I'm going to say it in the mic, okay? And I served as vice chair on that board. I went through a CEO search selection process, and I also voted for a school levy. And that is a very unique perspective that we definitely don't have time for. However, it was one of the biggest motivations for this project. And so I took that experience as a professor, as a public servant, unpaid public servant, might I add, on the Cleveland School Board, and as a former Cleveland student, and the granddaughter and the daughter of Cleveland students. And I thought, what does the community need, and where do I fit into the movement, and what can I offer? And it was Relay Cleveland. And Relay Cleveland is a public history campaign that chronicles the 50th anniversary of school desegregation in Cleveland. I have 2 babies, but it has temporarily become the 3rd. And it's one of my most proudest career achievements, Mr. Edwin. It really is.
I want to say the NAACP was honored to be a part of it.
Thank you.
A part of it, and so many other organizations. To our listeners, if you haven't had a chance to learn about Relay Cleveland, you are missing out. And your time is running out, and you need to check it out. So to that end, please plug in how they can learn about Relay Cleveland.
Yes. So Relay Cleveland is a campaign. We're calling you to action. One, so you have something to do in this movement. One is to learn. So if you go to relaycleveland.com, all of our digital content will be there. So we have 12 individual interviews with former and current students, former activists. We have an 8-minute mini documentary that has received raving reviews. We have a 200+ year research timeline, which I think is slept on, quite frankly. And we have tons of resources. What Mr. Edwin is referring to is the creative exhibit that is on display in Brett Hall at the Cleveland Public Library main branch. That's 325 Superior Avenue. And that will be on display in Brett Hall through February 28th, 2026. It is original commission pieces by local artists on all types of canvases. So we have traditional canvases. We also have a desk mural. We have suitcase murals. And it tells the story of school desegregation, which, if I may, if you don't think school desegregation plays a part in your life in Cleveland, I am here to hold your hand and tell you it does. The story of school desegregation is one of space and movement, race, place, economics, politics. It's one of the juiciest undertold stories in Cleveland's history. And when you talk about the civil rights movement and you rightfully mention Selma and Montgomery and Birmingham and Atlanta, I want you to put my girl Cleveland on the list because she deserves to be on the list. And you will know that once you engage with Relay Cleveland.
Absolutely. And again, school is getting ready to come to an end for Christmas break. Mm-hmm. Don't say you all don't have time. You have time.
Yes.
Get downtown to that library. Check out Relay Cleveland. Learn and get immersed in the Cleveland history. Mm-hmm. And for those who want to tap into you and more about the work the Legacy Perspective is doing, how can they get in contact with you? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, well, you can follow me on socials at LinkedIn, Leah D. Hudnall. You can check out my website, thelegacyperspective.com. And I'm really excited. 2026, the programming calendar for 2026, I've yet to publish, but we have more Black storytelling tours on wheels that are coming. So if you don't know, we do pop-up trolley tours where we make different stops around the city that pertains to Black history and Black culture. We're going to keep Relay Cleveland alive, even if it's digitally. And we're also going to have some Legacy Live storytelling sessions that will pop up soon as well.
And if people are interested in doing their own storytelling projects, you are here.
Yes,
and
I'm
we can
here.
Connect with you.
I'm the story champion. I should have led with that. I'm your girl. You want to tell your story? You want to tell grandma's story? Please contact me, even if it's just a low pressure, no pressure coffee date. Let's talk about it.
All right, you all heard it here first. Leah, thank you for taking some time to just come in.
Talk
to us today. To the audience, thank you for tuning in to another great episode of Cleveland Pulse. As we get ready for the holidays, make sure you take care of yourself. Check that mental health and have those conversations with mom, dad, grandma, and grandpa that you haven't had. You don't want to miss on the next opportunity. You don't want that opportunity to end before it's too late. All right? If I don't talk to you for the next time, take care of yourself. Peace.